Welcome to today's episode of Sparks by PRCA. This new series, hosted by the PRCA Equity and Inclusion Advisory Board, explores key issues across gender, age, sexual orientation, neurodiversity, disability, religious beliefs, and mental health. Today, I'm your host, Ishtar Schneider, co-chair of PRCA's EIAB. In this episode, we'll explore a crucial and timely topic, the significant barriers faced by ethnic minority women in the workplace. A new research study, the first ever partnership between the nonprofit People Like Us and industry organization Women in PR, has brought some stark realities to light. The report, titled The Recognition Gap, reveals that ethnic minority women in the UK are facing the highest levels of exclusion, discrimination, and stalled career progression. To discuss these important findings, I'm really honored to be joined by two incredible leaders who are at the forefront of this research in our industry. First, Whitney Simon, founder of Anchor and Flow and a spokesperson for People Like Us, the nonprofit organization creating space and opportunity for people of minority ethnic backgrounds in the creative industries. Whitney is a strategic communications leader with a decade of experience spanning the US and UK tech sector. She's dedicated her career to transforming workplace culture and embedding inclusion into how organizations work. We also have with us Angela Balakrishnan, a strategic communications and engagement leader with 20 years experience in government communication and journalism. She believes in the power of great comms to build trust, shape policy, and influence behavior to deliver societal impact. Ange is also the vice president of the Women in PR and has held senior industry leadership roles, including serving on the board of the Asian Communications Network. Whitney, Angela, welcome to Sparks, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. So excited.
Amazing. Well, I know there's a lot to get into today, so we're going to get right into it. And I wanted to start by talking about this collaboration that I mentioned between your two organizations, which was launched a bit earlier this year for International Women's Day. So can you tell us a little bit more about how this came about and what the goal was that you set out to do? Ange, I might start with you.
Thanks, Ishtar. As you say, I'm the Vice President of Women in PR. I've been on the committee a few years now, and I'm also a massive fan of People Like Us. And I think we're two organisations that have a lot of shared values. I think we both believe in the power of community and coming together. Both believe in championing unseen or uncelebrated talent. And I think we also believe in this kind of shared truth that if one of us rises, we all do. Our mission at Women in PR is to increase the number and the diversity of women in leadership roles. And one of the things that we wanted to focus on this year when we were thinking about the campaigns that we wanted to make some noise on was the issue around intersectionality. So, what does it mean? We already know it can be challenging for women in the workplace, especially when you're thinking about issues like pay and progression. But how does that get harder when you kind of add on other layers of diversity? So coming together with People Like Us felt like a very natural step to look at that intersectionality point of what it means to be a woman of colour in the workplace. And then I think something that we both shared was trying to understand that picture outside of London. We know that lots of kind of the experiences that get talked about are very kind of London-centric, but actually these challenges can be felt more acutely once you leave the M25. And as Women in PR, we've already started to broaden out our activities. We've done a few things in Manchester and in Leeds. And I think it was the first time for People Like Us to take their wonderful work outside of the city. So we not only collaborated on the kind of research piece behind this campaign, but we had a fantastic event in Birmingham. And you could just tell like what it meant to have an entire evening dedicated to 11 exceptional women of colour, a lot of them from the Midlands area. That doesn't happen very often, and that was really, really powerful. And as I said, the objective was to kind of shine a spotlight on this issue, and we did that through the research that we carried out. But more than that, we didn't want to just talk about a problem. We wanted to provide some practical solutions and clear call to action. And that's the brilliant work that Whitney also helped us with, which we'll be talking about a bit more detail.
Amazing. And Whitney, what about you from the People Like Us side?
Yeah, I mean, echoing a lot of Angela's sentiments, but people like us has always admired the work that Women in PR has been doing. So the opportunity to collaborate and align in terms of a topic that's super important and helps us to think about equity and representation in a more holistic way was just something that we were like, yes, we absolutely want to be part of it. And I think again to Angela's point, I think sometimes when we're thinking about equity and we're thinking about inclusion, we tend to forget other factors. We focus a lot on race, gender, but we don't necessarily focus on socioeconomic status. We don't necessarily focus on, whether someone lives in the city or whether someone lives further outside of the city. And so being able to also reinforce that by bringing in voices that oftentimes we don't hear from because there is a lot of focus on London was just something that we're really, really excited to be a part of. So yeah, just it's a collaboration that just felt like a no-brainer. And it's been great working together with women in PR.
Amazing. Well, obviously, I've got a women in PR hat as well, looking after mentoring. And so, personally, I was really thrilled to see this partnership come to life because I think the work that both organizations do, as you say, share a lot of similar values. And it was amazing to see this come to life. So, I'm going to ask Angela a bit about the research itself. So, what did this, find? What can you tell us a bit about the actual recognition gap, and elaborate a bit on what this means and how this is really manifesting in the daily lives of women of ethnic minority backgrounds?
So the research that we carried out was twofold. We worked with Census Wide on a survey that looked at the kind of picture for women of colour, especially again outside of London and from different socioeconomic backgrounds at national level. But then I think we could also play back a lot of what we were seeing at national level to the PR and communications industry. So alongside the research survey that we did, we also went out and spoke to a number of women who kind of responded to our call for voices to really get a kind of the lived experience and the real kind of color and detail behind the headline stats. And what we saw was probably a picture that we are familiar with, but I think it just kind of emphasized how hard and stark it is if you are a woman of color in the workplace. And essentially, I think what we found was that for these women, they are being overlooked. They're not being supported well enough, especially in comparison to some of their other peers and colleagues, and they're essentially being left behind when it comes to their careers. And some of the numbers I think were really, really hard hitting. So I think about 3 in 10 said they've often had their ideas ignored, dismissed, or rejected until repeated by someone else. And I think that's something that I can certainly relate to, being talked over at a meeting or feeling like you're saying something and it doesn't really quite cut through until someone else says it. And you think, did I just not explain it in the right way? Or, what is it about how I said that, shared that idea that didn't quite land? A significant amount, I think about a fifth of the people who responded said they're often overlooked for stretch opportunities. And again, there can be this kind of opaqueness about how opportunities come about. Do you have to be in the club? Do you have to be in the right sort of rooms, the right conversations for these opportunities to be shared? And we know that, those stretch opportunities are the stepping stone to kind of getting the next progression, promotion, the next pay rise. So again, this kind of feeling that they're not getting equal access to those opportunities and they're not really clear about how those opportunities are accessible. And I think lots of these were amounting to the fact that people felt, these women of colour felt like they're being left behind and where they expected to be in their careers. They're looking around them, they're seeing other people progress faster. They're seeing other people kind of get paid or recognised for the work that they're doing, and they're not feeling the same experiences at work. There was another side of this as well. That's not just about the kind of pay and progression aspects. And I think it is also the mental load of often being the only person representing a race or a diverse background in the room. And I think we know a lot about, the kind of concept of code switching and having to sort of adapt who you are and how you show up because you don't feel like you're kind of wholly represented in that room. And so a lot of the things that we were hearing was women self-silencing, kind of feeling like they're carrying the burden of representing a whole community, often being asked to be the voice of diversity in the room, which, again, is quite a weight to carry. And I think this general feeling of you're kind of navigating this room and you're doing it almost in the dark. You don't know quite what to do to succeed. There are these unspoken rules, feedback can be woolly. And it just makes the whole kind of experience of trying to kind of build your career that much harder when you don't know the kind of rules that you're having to play by.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting the nuance there, right? Being asked to contribute, but only as it relates to your lived experience rather than your
Mm,
professional expertise, which I think is, as you say, not surprising necessarily, but obviously, concerning when we look at the results of the research. I want to touch on the what you mentioned right there around the kind of the mental load, because it's understandably taking a toll on the mental health of women of color in our industry, which is concerning. And so, Whitney, I might come to you and say, how do you think that we can tackle this, both currently and in the future for, women who might be considering a career in comms, but obviously hearing these insights and seeing the experiences other people are having, they might be thinking twice, right?
Absolutely. And I think whenever I get asked this question, it feels like the response I give is a bit kind of basic in nature, but I think what we tend to forget is that the simplest, most straightforward approach is usually what's required, but a lot of people want to overlook it because it's uncomfortable. But I think one of the biggest things that can help as we're looking to the future and bringing in the next generation of women from diverse backgrounds is acknowledging the situation. Oftentimes what, in my experience working in agency, we want to glaze over with, frilly language talking about like, oh, it's just, we want you to speak up more, or, you're just a bit too quiet, or, we weren't thinking about that. That wasn't the case. And often that leads to that gaslighting of feeling like, am I just making this up or is there something that's not right?
mm,
And that is what contributes, or at least speaking on my, like from my experience, that is what really contributes to that burnout and that anxiety. And I'll be quite frank, like depression, feeling as though I think there's something wrong, but no one else is saying it. So maybe it's just me. I'm the problem. I'm the reason why I can't work at different agencies. I'm not meant for this industry. Um, and being so, or something as simple as acknowledging this industry, a lot of industries have an issue when it comes to women, but especially women from diverse backgrounds, I think is really important because how can we move forward if we can't acknowledge that there's a problem? How can we move forward if we can't name, when something bad happens, we can't name it, we can't apologize for it, and we can't learn from it and grow from it. And I find that in a lot of organizations, that's exactly what they want to do. But then, they pivot and they're like, let's do this campaign. Let's put, women of color all over our marketing, all over our website, and think, oh, well, that's enough. And it kind of speaks to what we've touched on a bit already. It's just women of color do not want to be a token. Women of color don't want to feel as though you're bending over backwards to represent them, to champion them, to support them. These women are good at what they do. They have something to contribute to the organization. They have something to contribute to society. And what they're asking for is nothing outside the norm. They're asking to be recognized and acknowledged and championed for the work that they do that oftentimes people take credit for. So something that I'm really, really passionate about and was one of the reasons why I was so excited about this campaign is we have to name what the problem is. Even
mm,
if it's uncomfortable, even if it kind of goes against the whole, but it's a nice culture. Nice does not mean equitable. Nice does not mean that you are giving, that we are inclusive. What we need is for people to say, this has been a long-standing issue. We recognize it and we are going to do better. And then being really transparent about exactly how we will do better.
absolutely. I think that plays into the name of the campaign, the recognition gap, because it's, recognizing these women, the talent, the contribution they bring, and making sure that they're not being overlooked and undersupported. But it's also recognizing where you need to do better, where you have the pay gaps, where are missing those voices in the room, where
Mhm.
you're recognizing about who's not getting the opportunities and the promotion. It's like, as Whitney says, like acknowledging the hard stuff rather than trying to sweep it under the carpet. So that recognition gap really plays in all directions.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think, this is where we can be really clear that recognition isn't just nice words, right? Isn't just like
Mhm.
a nice thank you and a pat on the back. Like we're talking about, people's careers, livelihoods, salaries, right? And recognition in that way as well. So it's all of those things that contribute. And people like us has done a lot of amazing work, right, on lobbying the government. I mean, PRCA has been involved in some of this as well, on implementing mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting, which there's obviously been some positive movement on in the last few months, which has been really great to see. But can you tell us a little bit, Whitney, on why this is so critical and what these, kind of more institutional systemic levers can do in helping us, kind of move the dial in a positive way?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm not saying anything that anyone on this call isn't aware of, but we're living in a really scary world right now. We've seen the rise of far-right rhetoric. We've seen the rolling back of D&I commitments starting in the US, but also infiltrating around the globe. We also feel this sense of that all the efforts, all the work that's been done when it comes to progress, it feels like it's being chipped away incredibly quickly. And it's causing a lot of anxiety. It's causing a lot of fear. But it's in these moments that it's really important that where we can, we implement or we really call for those checks and balances. Because as we've seen in history, like when political climate shifts, it's always the most marginalized voices that are the ones that are hit the hardest, right? And so when it comes to mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting, this isn't, and again, like I think what I love about this campaign, this isn't a nice to have. This isn't us doing a favor for this community. It's about protection, but it's also about doing what's fundamentally right, what's fair, what's equitable. And if we're being honest, why should anybody's gender or ethnicity impact how much they get paid? it's it shouldn't. There's no reason for that to be the case. So, looking at what happened when we did gender pay gap reporting becoming mandatory, it really made sure that organizations had to confront those uncomfortable truths. It created accountability and it started to shift behavior slowly but surely. And I'm not saying that it was a perfect fix, but it was a step, right? The name of the game is we're like ongoingly trying to improve, to progress, to address the systems that have been established to keep people down. And so, what we hope or what we want with mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting is that same next step in this journey. We want the same logic applies, like the same urgency applies, and the same idea that like someone should not be paid less because they are a female, or someone shouldn't be paid less just because they're melanated. So with this mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting, what's really great is that they have to do it. It's not just, oh, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. And that can start to create that level playing field of really being honest about, have we made any progress, or are we just looking at campaigns that we've put forward and saying that we're, progressive and inclusive when actually employees within the organization are having a completely different experience. And so that transparency is really powerful. And I think when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion in general, that transparency is really important. People love to use the word progress, right? Oh, we've made so much progress. We've seen this, we've seen that. But then when it actually comes to proving it, which is interesting thinking about the industry we're in, right? PR and comms, we'd never go to a client and be like, oh, we've made so much progress on this, and then not have stats to back it up. And so with mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting, we are asking these organizations, oh, you talk about progress? Let's see the stats. Let's see what's happening here. Where things are stalled, what are the steps that you're going to take to address that? And that's incredibly important, especially for women from ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah, that's great. I once had someone describe the kind of work in DEI to me as like two steps forward, one step back. But as long as we're still moving forward, then, it's going to be messy. It's not going to be perfect, right? But the whole point is to take these steps forward. And as you say, I think this is it's positive signs and being able to have that accountability and transparency on where people stand, where organizations stand, right? It's not about shaming. It's about understanding, your organization's, kind of current situation and how you move forward. But speaking of progress, on gender equity, we know that this has been an issue for decades, right? This is not a new challenge, and we've had limited and sometimes stalled progress. I think organizations like WEF have estimated it will take more than our lifetimes to tackle this at the current pace. And so, I might get both of you to respond to this quickly, but in your opinion, how are we going to accelerate that progress, right? What's really going to make the difference, and how can the PR and communications industry specifically take a leading role on driving this change?
I mean, Whitney's already touched on this. I think it's really trying to acknowledge the problem for what it is. This isn't just like, oh, it's a confidence issue or it's a capability issue. Like the system is not working and the
Mhm.
system needs to change. And I think if we can start by at least like recognizing and accepting that, then like that's the first step. I think the other thing is like, we're very good, I think, as an industry of saying kind of warm words and platitudes. So that is not going to be what shifts the dial here. There's one thing about making a commitment, and then there's another thing about doing the hard work. And it is hard. This isn't easy stuff, but it requires proper action over time to really make the difference. And I think, framing this is not a nice to have. It is a business risk. We are going to lose future leaders if we do not fail to tackle some of these challenges. I come back to, what can the comms and PR industry do? We specialize in communicating and being authentic and not putting a spin on things. So let's do that. Let's make sure we take away the opaque promotion processes. Let's publish the data, as Whitney was talking about, to help close the pay gaps. Let's make the unspoken rules of the workplace and the cliques like spoken about. Let's give clear feedback. How many of us have had feedback that just is like so woolly and you're like, what am I going to take away from this? How is this going to help me develop my skills in my career? So, if we want to lead the way, let's do the things that we claim we do so well, which is being authentic, communicating, being transparent, because I think those are the things that will actually help shift not just the behaviors, but the systems that we need to address these issues.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like this kind of really aligns with something that Shiraz, one of the founders of People Like Us, said, which was, really women of color are asking for fairer systems, better support, and more transparency. So, I think you said it all there, but we're not asking for anything crazy. We're asking for, to be honest, like the bare minimum of what should be expected, right, in the workplace. So, I think that's a great point. I want to touch on the role of allyship. And so, Whitney, I might come to you. We talk about the role of allies in conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion a lot, right? But when we're thinking about the issue that we've been talking about today, what does genuine allyship look like in the context of supporting ethnic minority women in the workplace?
Yeah, I think really simply, it's about doing the work, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might put you at risk, and even when there's no one there to see. I think, a lot of people love to do the work, quote unquote, when they know that it's going to lead to a potential award nomination, or they know it's going to lead to, solid engagement on social media. That is not allyship. That is performative allyship. And what women from ethnic minority backgrounds need are those people that are willing to do that work without, any guarantee of fanfare or, praise or anything like that. And so there's a couple of things that I always encourage when it comes to being a good ally. One of the things is by training your ears, expanding your knowledge. What are microaggressions? How does unconscious bias play into the progression framework, the feedback framework? When you're better able to pick up on that, especially if you're not from that community, that is really helpful because then you start to see and you can start to acknowledge, oh, wow, this system is incredibly flawed. And I completely agree with Ange. The system is broken, but there's a part of me, maybe not a conspiracy theorist, but there's a part of me that thinks the system was built this way intentionally, right? This system was built to keep people of color, women, people from any diverse background down. And so, if anything, I'd argue the system is working the way that it needs to by keeping people kind of guarded from exactly what's happening, how insidious it can be. And so I think that bit about training your ears is really helpful as an ally because then you can start to pick up and see exactly where these things are happening and then you can start speaking up. I think something else that's a really easy way of being an ally is by amplifying folks' ideas. Like Ange was talking earlier about how she's been in meetings where she's presented something, said something, and it was crickets. And then someone else, maybe a man or, probably a white man has said it and everyone in the room is like, this is groundbreaking stuff. And I've been in that situation too many times to count. And it just chips away at your confidence and it feeds into that gaslighting that I was talking about earlier. Like, maybe I'm not speaking right. There's something wrong. And that is so, it just whittles down your confidence. It whittles down the idea or the notion that you are good enough to be in this industry. And I've gone through that. So being there and again, training your ears, but also listening in for when people are speaking and their voices aren't being heard and using your platform to amplify those ideas, to amplify those voices and crediting it back. And then, another opportunity or another way of being a really great ally is sharing opportunities, right? A lot of the times when it comes to progressing in this career, network means a lot. The people that you know within those organizations, that is a huge step or a huge privilege that can help people get into different roles. And we've seen that with, the tough job market that we're facing right now. So using your platform, using your network to help other women from diverse backgrounds access those opportunities that they may not necessarily be privy to without that help. I'm sure Ange has some other tips as well, but I
No,
think those three are solid.
they are solid. And I think the thing with being an ally is like I think sometimes people think, oh my gosh, I've got to go and like fix the world. Like I can't do
Hmm.
it. It's overwhelming. But I think the way Whitney's just described allyship is that they are all things that we can be doing every day. Like we don't need to be necessarily an expert to be an ally. Obviously, there is something about doing the work and understanding the issues, but like the power of saying someone's name in a conversation or a room where they will never normally get a look in, that goes like miles. That can have such a transformative impact. And it takes nothing for you to do that. Like introducing someone to a connection that can like help unlock them a door or a conversation. Again, it's so effortless. And I think it's just reminding ourselves that allyship can be the smallest of actions, but the most powerful impact for the person involved.
Yeah, that's great. And for me, a lot of the allyship also overlaps with sponsorship actions as well. So it's really about like we could call it like lifting as you rise, right? But I think it's about opening doors, for others as well along the way. So I love that. And I want to also touch on, we've touched on allyship. What can you do if you're not, part of that group yourself? But if we're speaking, we're three women of color on this call today, which makes me very happy. But for women of color in the industry already who are dealing with this day to day, what are some of the tools or resources that are available? Whitney, I think you put some together as part of this campaign, so would love to hear a bit about, what can we be doing to support and tackle some of this ourselves day to day.
Absolutely. I think this is a pervasive issue that requires efforts on all sides. Acknowledgement is a really key thing. Organizations acknowledging what's happening and doing the work and implementing the policies that acknowledge it, name it, and then create tangible solutions to address it is really important. Um, What's really great about this campaign is that we've given that, right? Because I think sometimes when it comes to doing this work, it can feel a bit daunting in terms of what should we do? How do we do this well? How do we not mess up? And so this campaign, we've created pledges and tips for organization when it comes to how they can build better workplaces for women of color, which is really fantastic. I know we just finished talking about allies, but we also created kind of tools and resources for allies. And this is informed by lived experiences from women of color. Several ways to be better allies, speaking to what I just spoke about before, but also additional tips and ways that you can truly be a really great ally to ethnic women within the industry. And then when it comes to supporting ethnic women specifically, one thing when we were pulling this together, we really wanted to make it clear ethnic women are not responsible for addressing a system that was created to keep them down. And so what we wanted to do with kind of the resources that we gave them is that simple acknowledgement of like, yo, the system is rigged. What you are experiencing is real. You are not, you are not wrong. You're not, losing it. Like what you're facing and experiencing is incredibly demoralizing. We see you, we hear you. What we want to do is we want to give you tips and tools to help you navigate this system while we fully acknowledge that the system is rigged as well. So with these tools, some of the things that we talked about in terms of kind of how we can support women of color is by, you know, seeking out sponsors and seeking out organizations like Women in PR, people like us that have resources to connect people with sponsors, not just mentorship. Because I think as ethnic women, we've talked a lot about mentorship, and mentorship does have an important role to play. But when it comes to those opportunities, that's that sponsorship that we need from allies, right? We need folks that are going to say our names in those rooms that we're not in. We need those folks that are going to share job listings that they get from, just a random WhatsApp group that they have with a friend. That sponsorship is really, really important. Also, in terms of understanding kind of feedback and navigating that woolly feedback that Angela talked about, and I can definitely speak to that. Being able to be really clear about how you can push back, ask questions about, okay, so this is what you've said here. Can I drill in a bit further about, can I get that tangible feedback in terms of what you want me to address? I can't change my personality. I can change or adapt the ways of working. So again, we don't think that those tips are going to change the system. That's not what they were built. That's not why we developed them, but it really is a tool to acknowledge what ethnic women are facing and giving them just a little bit of support as they're navigating it, as we call on allies and organizations to really be doing the heavy lifting when it comes to addressing the systemic problems that we're seeing in this industry as well as wider industries.
Great, thank you. I mean, I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into putting that together, and a lot of people who have already started to use those resources. So just a huge thank you for all the work that's gone into that. I know, it's going to be a really big help for a lot of people. We're almost out of time, so I wanted to ask you both a closing kind of final thought. So given the topic that we've covered today, what is one takeaway that you hope our listeners leave with, and in particular, those in leadership positions themselves who might be able to start, galvanizing some of this change?
Shall I kick off? I'm going to be cheeky. I'm going to say two things, Ishtar. So,
I'll allow it.
thanks. So firstly, I think my message is to women of color. If you've ever felt like you haven't been enough, my message to you is you absolutely are enough. It's the system that's stacked against you. And I think what we saw when we had our PLU and Women in PR event in Birmingham were 11 incredible stories. And they weren't stories of victimhood, they were stories of absolute excellence. And it was the perfect antidote to this research because it shows what we are capable of. So you have always been enough. Any woman of color who's listening to this, you are enough. It's the organizations who have failed to recognize that, and they need to do the work to look beyond the surface and recognize what they're missing. To organizations, we have produced so many great resources for you. We are giving you the clear kind of calls to action of what we need to be doing differently. If you are genuinely committed to this, please share, please talk about it openly, like and publicly, because I think how we normalize these conversations, how we become more transparent about what we're doing and where we need to do better is where the real change starts to begin. So those are my two calls to action.
Thank you. And Whitney?
I mean, gosh, and you've got me all in my feels. I just think about younger Whitney and how much I needed to hear that I was enough. That was beautiful. But I think the only thing I would say is women, ethnic women aren't asking for good intentions. We're asking for fairer systems. And those are very different things. We are asking for what we deserve. We have done incredible work, as Ange was saying. And so we should be recognized for that work.
I think that's such a powerful ending, closing thought. So I want to just take a moment to say thank you to you both for this really incredibly insightful and important conversation. The research that you produced is a powerful call to action for all of us across the industry. And it's clear that acknowledging the recognition gap is just the first step, and the real work really lies in how we implement the practical solutions that we've talked about today. To our listeners, I really urge you to read the full report. You can find it on the People Like Us and Women in PR websites, and we'll also include a link in our show notes. This isn't just a conversation for a single podcast episode, though, and we know that it's an ongoing dialogue that we really all must be a part of. So thank you for tuning into Sparks. Join us next time as we continue to explore the stories and ideas that are shaping a more equitable and inclusive PR industry. Thank you, Whitney and Ange.
Thanks so much for the conversation.